Imagine the four most powerful rivals in a country, right?
Okay.
Like politicians who have literally spent years trying to defeat each other.
Yeah, sworn political enemies, basically.
Exactly. And suddenly they all just walk into the same room
Yeah.
and sign a piece of paper promising to share a single crown.
It's a phenomenal moment. I mean, we are talking about the national summit of all opposition political party leaders.
Right. And today, Saturday, April 25, 2026, in Nigeria, that actually happened. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today for you, the listener, is to figure out if this summit is, a historic turning point for Nigerian democracy or just another doomed political experiment.
And there is a lot to unpack to figure that out.
Definitely. Now, just looking at our stack of sources today, we've got reports from Premium Times, Channels TV, Vanguard, and a few others. And we are dealing with some heavily charged claims here.
Oh, absolutely. From both the opposition and the ruling APC.
Right. So we want to explicitly state right up front that our job in this deep dive isn't to play referee or, pick sides or endorse anybody's narrative.
No, not at all. We are just going to impartially look at the raw mechanics of the chessboard, right? To just understand the strategic maneuvers contained in these source materials.
Exactly. So let's set the scene for the listener. Imagine you are in the banquet hall of the Oyo State Government House in Ibadan.
Okay.
Governor Seyi Makinde is hosting. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo is chairing the event.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you put that many former presidents, vice presidents, and governors in one room, the strategic math becomes incredibly complicated.
Yeah, and to really understand that math, we first have to look at the actual ink on the page.
Right, what they actually signed.
Exactly. Because what Tanimu Turaki, he's the factional national chairman of the PDP, the People's Democratic Party, what he read to that room goes way beyond, normal political theater.
And real quick, just for context, when we say factional chairman, that means the PDP itself is already dealing with internal splits.
Right. Yes, exactly. Which already sets a really complex stage for what he is about to read, which is known as the Ibadan Declaration.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because they laid out 8 substantive resolutions, like 8 pillars.
They did. And they range from baseline defensive maneuvers to, honestly, incredibly aggressive structural demands.
Okay, lay them out for us.
So the first one is foundational. They resolve to resist efforts by the ruling APC to impose what they call a one-party state.
Right. And then pillar number 2 is just simply committing to actually contest the 2027 elections.
Yeah, which, sounds obvious.
Right, but when you were trying to wrangle a massive coalition, just getting everyone to agree to stay in the fight and not splinter off early, that's a crucial first step.
It is the absolute prerequisite. But pillar number 3, this is the earthquake.
Yeah.
They formally agreed to work toward fielding a single presidential candidate supported by all participating parties.
Wow. We are definitely circling back to that one because that is a massive undertaking.
Oh, massive. But they didn't just stop at internal party politics. They went after the institutions.
Right. Pillar 4, they issued a formal vote of no confidence in the INEC Chairman Joash Amupitan.
INEC being the Independent National Electoral Commission, for those, catching up.
Right. Then for Pillar 5, they're demanding the National Assembly review the Electoral Act of 2026 to remove sections they claim threaten electoral integrity.
And Pillar 6 demands the immediate release of leading politicians who are currently detained on bailable offenses.
Right. And then Pillar 7 is another massive institutional demand. They want INE to extend the primary election deadline from the end of May all the way to the end of July 2026.
Which is a huge leap. And finally, Pillar 8 commends Nigerian resilience against what they call state capture.
State capture.
Yeah, which is a heavily loaded term, basically accusing the ruling party of co-opting state institutions for their own benefit.
So what's fascinating here is the public documentation.
Right, exactly. This is not backroom gossip. It's not an anonymous leak to the press.
Right. These figures stood in front of the cameras in Ibadan and put all 8 of these demands publicly on the record.
Yeah.
So, if we look at the structure of this, it is kind of like a massive corporate merger.
How so?
Well, you have 8 different companies agreeing to build one single product,
Yeah.
right? They know they want to dominate the market. They know who their main competitor is. But the actual leadership structure is completely blank.
Right.
Nobody has actually decided who gets to be the CEO.
That is a great analogy. And that brings us to the fatal flaw in the ink. Because in high-stakes political negotiations, phrasing is literally everything.
Yeah.
Look at Pillar 3 again. They agreed to work toward fielding one candidate.
Work toward... Oh, I see. You're saying it's just an expression of intent. It
Exactly.
isn't actually a binding contract.
No, it is a process goal, not a nomination. I mean, they left out the identity of the candidate, obviously, but structurally, they completely left out the mechanism for selecting them.
Right, like is it a primary vote?
A-
A consensus agreement?
A coin flip? We don't know. And they also left out the timeline for making that decision. And, crucially, they omitted any mention of consequences for non-compliance.
Wait, if you have 4 mega personalities who all believe they are the undeniable main character, right?
Yeah.
And there are no rules for how to pick a winner, aren't they practically guaranteeing a spectacular explosion down the line?
That is the structural paradox of this entire summit. You are dealing with individuals who bring massive, highly specific leverage to the table. And honestly, none of them are used to playing second fiddle.
Okay, let's break down that leverage then, because these 4 heavyweights were actually in the hall today.
Right.
Start with former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. He wants to contest, potentially via the ADC, the African Democratic Congress.
Yeah, so Atiku's leverage is pure seniority. I mean, he is claiming unparalleled pedigree and political capital here.
Right.
He is essentially saying, he has the deepest networks, the most experience, making him the natural, obvious head of this ticket.
But then you have Peter Obi. And, I mean, you cannot talk about Obi without talking about the obedient movement.
No, you really can't.
For listeners catching up, this was a massive grassroots youth movement that completely disrupted the traditional two-party status quo in the last election cycle.
It was huge.
And that energy didn't just vanish. It is a highly motivated, completely disruptive electoral force.
Exactly. So you have Atiku's traditional network versus Obi's grassroots disruption. But then you add Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso into the mix.
The regional powerhouse.
Precisely. He controls the Kwankwasia base.
Which is massive.
It is. Just to explain the mechanics of that briefly, this is a fiercely loyal political movement centered in Kano and across the Northwest.
Right.
And in Nigerian electoral math, the Northwest has a massive concentration of registered voters. Kwankwaso's absolute lock on that demographic gives him immense negotiating leverage.
Because it's practically impossible to win without them.
Right. It is incredibly difficult to build a winning national coalition without those numbers.
So we have seniority, we have grassroots disruption, we have regional lock, and then Rotimi Amaichi is also in the mix.
Yeah, and Amaichi claims the strongest position based on a completely different formula.
Which
Generational positioning combined with deep, long-term executive experience.
Wow. So you literally have 4 wildly different, highly compelling arguments for why they each should be the one single candidate.
Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the historical context here is flashing red warning lights.
How so?
Because these unresolved mechanisms, the lack of a concrete rulebook that we were just talking about, these are the exact fracture points of every previous Nigerian opposition coalition.
Oh, like the 2022 PDP primary.
Exactly, or the 2023 Labor NNPP ticket negotiations. The mechanics of those failures are almost identical to what we are seeing set up here today.
Right. They go in with big promises.
Right. They enter the pre-election period with this grand, formal commitment to unity. But when it actually comes time to hold a primary election and, print one single name on a ballot, nobody wants to step down.
Because there's no pre-agreed mechanism to force them to.
Exactly. Without a pre-agreed, enforceable mechanism to manage those ambitions, the coalition naturally fractures under the pressure of the electoral calendar.
Okay, so you have 4 massive egos with no rule book on how to pick a winner. But even if they miraculously agreed on a candidate today, they are staring down the barrel of a ticking clock, which I guess explains why their next major move was to attack the referee itself.
That brings us to INEC and pillar number 4, the vote of no confidence in Chairman Joash Amupitan, who just took over the commission in 2024 from Mahmoud Yakubu.
Right. And pillar number 7, demanding INC push the primary deadline from May 30 all the way to July 31st, 2026.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is like a sports team marching out of the field, demanding the referee be fired, and telling the league to pause the game clock for 2 months because they left their playbooks at home.
That is a perfect way to visualize it, because the internal chaos of the coalition is directly forcing them to attack external institutional deadlines.
Okay, break that down for us. Why do they need this extension so badly?
To understand the why behind this, we really have to look closely at the ADC, the African Democratic Congress.
Which is the party Atiku is eyeing, right? And the one Kwankwaso supposedly joined in March.
Yes. And right now, the ADC is paralyzed by a massive leadership crisis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, let me explain the mechanics of why this matters so much. In Nigerian electoral law, INC is legally required to monitor political party primaries.
Right.
But when a party splits into factions, and both factions claim to be the legitimate leadership, INC often refuses to recognize or monitor either side until the courts resolve the dispute.
So the umpire just steps back and says, call us when you figure it out.
That is the exact mechanism. And currently, the ADC's leadership dispute is sitting at the Supreme Court waiting for a ruling.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Because of this bottleneck, the ADC literally cannot conduct a legally recognized INC-monitored primary before that May 30 deadline.
Wait, so this demand to push the deadline to the end of July, it isn't just a casual request for, like, more prep time.
Not at all. It is a desperate existential bid for survival. They are trying to buy enough time for the Supreme Court to rule so the ADC can actually hold a primary and field a candidate.
Wow.
Without that extension, the platform they're trying to build this coalition on might legally vanish before the race even starts.
Okay, but let me push back on this whole strategy for a second. They are demanding the INEC chairman be removed.
Right.
Can they actually fire him? Like, is there any real mechanism for a coalition of opposition parties to just oust the head of the National Electoral Commission?
In short, no.
No.
The reality check here is the Nigerian Constitution. To legally remove a National Electoral Commissioner, you need a recommendation from the president, and then you need a 2/3 majority approval from the Senate.
And both of those are currently controlled by the ruling APC.
Exactly. There is zero procedural pathway for the opposition to force this removal.
So why do it? Why put a demand on paper that you know is legally impossible to execute?
Because it is a highly effective political pressure instrument.
That's so.
By collectively formalizing this vote of no confidence on paper, they are placing the electoral body at the absolute center of a political confrontation. Even if they can't fire him, they are setting the narrative early. They are establishing a baseline argument that the umpire is compromised. And that lays the groundwork for how they will frame any future setbacks, missed deadlines, or unfavorable court rulings.
That is brilliant structurally.
Yeah.
But the ruling party has to be fully aware of what they're trying to do. Right? The Tinubu administration didn't just sit back and let this narrative take hold.
No, their counterstrike was immediate, swift, and deliberate.
Yeah.
On the exact same day of the summit, the presidency fired back. They completely dismissed the Ibadan gathering, framing it as purely politically motivated posturing.
Right. They firmly pushed back on the idea that democracy itself is under threat.
Yeah.
Basically saying, we are governing, you are just campaigning.
Exactly. It is a clear signal that the APC intends to aggressively contest the framing of this Ibadan Declaration at every single level in real time. They aren't going to let the opposition own the news cycle uncontested.
But here's the thing. The EPC might not even need to work that hard to dismantle this coalition, because the opposition's own structural chaos might just do it for them.
That is very true.
Let's look at the Labor Party.
Yes. This is one of the most glaring puzzle pieces missing from this grand unified front.
Right.
Because the summit reports noted that the Labor Party, under Senator Nnadi Usman's leadership, was listed as being represented there.
Right, they were in the room.
They were. However, just this week, Senator Usman publicly declared that Peter Obi cannot return to the Labor Party platform for 2027.
Wait, pause. The Labor Party is supposedly part of this grand opposition coalition, but they have just locked the door on Peter Obi, who is arguably the single most recognizable figure associated with their recent electoral success. How does the Labor Party participate in a coalition that Peter Obi might end up leading?
It is a massive structural paradox. You have the party represented in the room, but they have actively disavowed one of the 4 mega personalities in that exact same room.
And it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
Look at Kwankwaso. You mentioned earlier he joined the ADC in March of 2026.
Right.
But the NNPP, the New Nigeria People's Party, which he famously ran under in the last cycle, they may still have separate structures and leadership completely intact.
Yeah, so the question becomes, are those massive regional NNPP structures coming along for the ride into this new coalition, or are they staying behind?
Right.
If Kwankwaso jumps to the ADC, does his entire Kwankwasia base automatically follow, or does the machinery fracture?
So what does this all mean? When you zoom out, this coalition is simultaneously trying to fight the ruling party for the presidency, fight the Electoral Commission over institutional deadlines, while internally fighting their own legal bottlenecks, structural chaos, and massive overlapping egos.
It's a lot.
It's like trying to build a high-speed train while simultaneously laying the tracks and arguing over who gets to drive all, while the regulatory board is threatening to shut down the railway in 4 weeks.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. And,
Right.
it requires an extraordinary level of critical thinking from the public.
Definitely.
When you hear about these grand political summits and see the photos of heavyweights shaking hands in a banquet hall, it is so easy to get swept up in the historic nature of the moment.
Oh, for sure.
But there is a massive gulf between signing a declaration of intent and actually executing a highly complex political merger under the extreme, unforgiving pressure of an electoral calendar.
Absolutely. So just to recap the incredible scope of what we have dug into today.
Yeah.
We have a historic gathering in Ibadan that produced an 8-pillar declaration.
Mm-hmm.
We have an incredibly ambitious but structurally flawed promise to field a single presidential candidate without any rule book on how to actually pick them. We have a direct, unprecedented pressure campaign against the INEC chairman and the primary deadlines, driven mostly by legal bottlenecks in the ADC. And we have 4 massive political egos all standing in the same room, while the ruling party actively dismantles their narrative in real time.
It is a deeply complex web of strategy and ambition.
Sure.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final piece of the puzzle from our source material to ponder.
Oh, what's that?
Something we haven't touched on yet, but that has profound implications as the road to 2027 begins.
Let's hear it.
During the summit, the opposition alleged that they had originally planned to meet in Abuja,
Okay.
but they claimed they were repeatedly denied access to public venues for their preparatory meetings, which is ultimately why they had to relocate to Oyo State.
Oh, wow.
Now, the presidency dismissed their overall characterization of the political landscape, obviously, but notably, they offered no specific rebuttal to that exact allegation about the venues being blocked.
That is a very specific detail to just leave hanging.
It is. So, I want you to mull over this question. If a pattern of restricting opposition access to basic public facilities can actually be documented, what obligation does that place on civil society, the media, and international election monitors right now, long before a single ballot is cast?
That is a phenomenal question to chew on, because it moves the conversation away from the high-level chess game of party politics down to the actual physical mechanics of how a democracy functions on a random Tuesday when someone just wants to rent a conference hall.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. To our listener, keep questioning the headlines, keep looking for the why behind the what, and we will catch you on next one.